Free agency may have slowed down, but with this team, it's never over, and that's evidenced by veteran tight end Tyler Conklin taking a visit with the Chargers, and I think that could be a solid addition.
You are Locked On Chargers, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Chargers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, and welcome into the Locked On Chargers podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Wade, joined as always by my co-host, David Droegemeier, and we've been covering the Chargers now for 9 seasons, but this is our 7th year as the host of the Locked On Chargers podcast, bringing you your team every day. Thank you to the everydayers out there for making us your first listen. To make sure that you never miss the show, go subscribe or follow for free on the Locked On Chargers YouTube channel and listen wherever you get your podcast from. David, what do we got today?
Well, first it was Evan Ingram. Now it is Tyler Conklin. The Chargers are bringing in whoever they can that plays the tight end position to try to add to a very, very thin room. And if they're not able to make a deal with Tyler Conklin, then they got to shift their focus to the draft. So that means maybe looking at guys like a Tyler Warren or a Colson Loveland. How far would Tyler Warren have to fall before the Chargers would feel comfortable pulling the trigger on a trade? And can the Chargers get that running game back to where Greg Roman said that he was going to bring it to?
I think we all assumed just because it was Greg Roman last year that it would be a top 10 unit, and it fell well short of that. But this episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. Dave, there was a report late on Thursday from Mike Garafolo who says the Chargers are hosting veteran tight end Tyler Conklin on a visit. Sources say a bit of a surprise he's still available, especially since few teams have shown interest in signing him, including the Jets, whom he had 170 catches for and 622 yards and 7 touchdowns over the last 3 years. We saw it not work out with Evan Ingram, as you talked about. Now they're going in a different direction. And to me, the reason I would like this move if they were to make it is just because it raises the floor of what you have in the tight end room right now. This is not a guy who you expect to be a top 10 tight end or is going to be super flashy and put up gigantic numbers. But all this dude has been since, really the last 4 years has been the epitome of solid. And I think right now in that room, especially as a receiving option, you would take solid all the way.
Absolutely, because right now this is what the room looks like. It's Will Dissly, Tucker Fisk, and McCallan Castles, which hasn't even sniffed the field for the Chargers at all. So that room right there is begging to be added to. And so obviously that's why the Chargers are bringing in another veteran option to try to add to this room. And there's a couple things I really like about Tyler Conklin. One of those things is he's only missed 3 games in 7 seasons. So he's been extremely durable. He's been very available, which obviously, as we've talked about with most of the other people that the Chargers have brought in and what they believe in, they want players that are durable and that are available. Hey, they're every day, right? That's the type of guys they like. And also, he's got really good hands. He only has 1 drop in his last 2 seasons. That's 1 drop on 150 targets.
That's
so
crazy.
Very, very sure-handed receiver. And hey, if you're going to bring somebody in that's a vet, and who's primarily a pass-catching option, then you want to make sure he's got the hands for it. And Tyler Conklin absolutely does.
Yeah, and I think that, when you just think about that playoff game and how 2 drops really changed the entire trajectory of that game by Will Dissly, who is not known for his passing proclivities before this year. But yeah, I think it's only 2 games that he's missed in his entire career. So that is the epitome of what we've seen the Chargers value, going with a Najee Harris instead of a potentially, J.K. Dobbins, and then he's still out there. Maybe it changes, and we'll talk about that on today's show. But yeah, when you look at it, I was surprised with the name Tyler Conklin having put up the numbers that he's been able to put up. Truly I was. I didn't necessarily, sorry, sir, I wasn't familiar with your game completely because, over the last 4 years, you heard the last 3 years, 170 catches, 1,600 yards. That's pretty darn good. If you go back 4 seasons, he's averaged 58 catches, 553 yards, and 2.5 touchdowns. Obviously not much of a red zone threat, but those other 2 stats, those are top 15 in the league. If he had 58 catches and 553 yards this season, he would have ranked 14th in catches and 15th in yards. So if you're telling me at this point of the offseason, the Chargers could go add a top 15 type production tight end, I think that is something that you're absolutely interested in. Like I said, definitely. I think it just, if you're not going to go like this to me shows me the Chargers are trying to keep the draft picks, right? Because I do think if they wanted to strike a deal for a Mark Andrews or a Dallas Goedert, they could. This tells me those guys are going to be free agents. If we really want those guys, we can go get those guys in 2026, right? And Mark Andrews, maybe that's even likely to happen in 2026. But for this year, this guy could get us by. And when you were literally last year relying on Tucker Fisk, right? When you're relying on Eric Tomlinson to make big plays in a game, yeah, this is absolutely a big move. And I know people are upset. We'll talk about Nick Petrelli's upset. Stone Smart's gone. Stone Smart's best season in 2024 was 16 catches, 208 yards. Tyler Conklin in 2021 had 61 catches, 593 yards, and also has a 600-yard season. So they're not even in the same ballpark, even though they bring different things to the table. If I was talking about concerns, it would definitely be run blocking, which I think is minimized by the Will Dissly and Tucker Fisk of it all. Yeah. Actually graded out worse against man coverage than Will Dissly last year, and that was the main knock. So as far as their games complementing each other as receivers, maybe not so much, and just not a huge playmaker, not an explosive guy with a career 9.7 yards per catch.
Yeah, I don't love that at all. Definitely not the most explosive athlete there from the tight end position, but
neither was Evan Ingram either, to be fair, right? Like that dude averaged 7.8 yards per carry. So I mean, they've already been interested in that for sure.
Definitely not. But the fact that he's been solid. He's a guy that will hopefully give you more production than Hayden Hurst was able to bring you. And it's probably going to be, at this point, obviously being out here, still being available, it's not going to be a big monetary investment either. And it's not going to change their, focus on how they attack the draft at this position either. I think this is something that you have to, I really feel like it's something you have to do. You got to add a veteran, pass catching option in that room while still focusing on raising the actual talent level overall in the draft. And, obviously bringing some youth, to mix in with that. But I think the room right now is just very shallow. It needs multiple bodies. So I think if you add a veteran to that group, and then you're able to add more of a young, maybe kind of budding superstar type that has that ability, then I think that's a more of a room that you would like, that has bodies and parts that complement what each other do.
Yeah, and I think the thing about making a move like this, which obviously they're telling you they're interested in doing, or at least checking out, I remember last year they had J.K. Donovan's visit well before he actually signed, so checking out the medicals and stuff like that to consider it as an option. But last time also it felt like maybe it got out that Evan Ingram was visiting the Chargers, so that maybe that the Denver Broncos would raise the offer a little bit, because we haven't heard anything out of the Chargers all offseason long, and all of a sudden Evan Ingram's on a visit. So you have to take that all with a grain of salt, but I don't think there's quite as many suitors, or at least in the same kind of ballpark of money with this guy as opposed to Evan Ingram. But I think the thing is this is a good move for them at this point of the offseason, and if they strike out, maybe they call an old friend, because you said, hey, you want to add somebody in this room. And I don't think that guy, and Tyler Conklin's not stopping you from taking Tyler Warren if he's there and you want him, right? This isn't that kind of move. But if you strike out and you just need somebody to add to that position, they could always call on an old friend, David. And that old friend is still out there off of a huge drop-off season, Gerald Everett.
Yeah, Gerald Everett had, it's almost eye-popping. Like, it makes you have to rub your eyes and look at the stats again to really believe what actually transpired for him in 2024. It's 8 receptions for 36 yards for the entire season. He just was not used. And in 2023 with the Chargers, he had 51 catches, 411 yards, and 3 touchdowns, and just plays with a physical, violent style that, you could easily see fitting and working in a Greg Roman, Jim Harbaugh style of offense, where they want to get into a knockdown, drag out fight. And Gerald Everett, obviously, if you've watched him play with the Chargers, that that's exactly what he likes to do as well. And so for a guy that, like a lot of the other free agents that the Chargers have brought in over the last, 1.5 seasons, it's another guy that you're buying low on to hopefully see if you can bounce back.
You're not really worried about his fit as much as a blocker as, we know now with the Tyler Conklin, he's not a good blocker. 77 out of 85 with 100 minimum run blocking snaps last year. 77 out of 85 is towards the bottom of the league, obviously. You're in Hayden Hurst territory there. But you could do a lot worse, I think, than Gerald Everett. I remember I texted you one day, and I was just like, what do you think Gerald Everett did this year? Obviously we don't follow the Bears that closely. We were both shocked to see 8 catches next to Gerald Everett's name after the seasons that he put together with Justin Herbert, including a 58 catch, 555 yard, 4 touchdown season in 2022. But
yeah,
now they could still go after it in the draft, and I still think they could address it early, even if they made this move. But would they potentially trade up for one of the top options? We're getting into that and more in today's Locked On Chargers podcast. Scaling your business requires the right expertise at the right time. With Upwork, you can find specialized freelancers in marketing, development, design, and more. Experts ready to help you take your business to the next level. Upwork gives businesses flexibility by connecting them with top freelance talent across multiple industries, including IT, AI, web development, and marketing. Whether you need extra hands for a project or a long-term partner, Upwork makes hiring simple and affordable. And it's all about finding the right talent. If you need help with marketing campaign, Upwork can connect you with a freelance expert who delivered incredible results already. And it's always fast and easy hiring with Upwork. Posting a job is free and simple, and within a day, with multiple qualified candidates you can choose from. Visit Upwork.com right now and post your job for free. That's UPWORK.com, Upwork.com, to connect with top talent and grow your business today. I also need to tell you guys about Monarch Money, because if you ever checked your bank account and wondered where did all my money go between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track, and that's where Monarch Money comes in. Your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app, it's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place, so you just stop managing your money and start building your wealth. When I started using Monarch, I realized just how much I was spending on food every month, and now I can budget smarter and save more. And I love having something to go for, something to target as far as, hey, I can lower that number next month, and it feels great when you can do it. And the other great part of it is just the easy collaboration. I use it with my wife, where my podcast checks disappear to every month. And now I can at least see where all of that is going. But you can take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL for half off of your first year. David, well, we did also want to do a Fan Mail Friday, even with the Tyler Conklin news. We always love to get you guys involved in the show, and there's been so much news recently that we haven't got you guys as involved as we've wanted to. But we talked about free agency and how the Chargers can kind of raise the level of that room going into the draft, just so you feel like you don't have to pigeonhole yourself into taking one exceptionally early, trying to go get one of those top guys potentially. But if it does stay this way and you do feel like that, how far would you be willing to trade up for one of the top guys? That's what Nick wants to know today.
Yo, what's going on, guys? Nick here calling. I'm just curious about what your thoughts are surrounding this tight end room right now. Personally, I'm very upset Stone Smart is playing for the Jets this season. He was the only guy really on our offense that seemed to have that spark, that electricity, besides McConkey. Now, with that said, that guy from Penn State we really want, but he's going to go pretty early. But if he does fall to the 12, 13, 14, 15 pick in the draft, at what point do you see Joe Ortiz saying, you know what, I'm going to trade up for this guy? Thanks, guys.
David, we both said it doesn't stop them from going to get a top tight end. And he's talking about Tyler Warren, Penn State, the do-it-all tight end who was, the best tight end in the country last season. How far do you think they'd be willing to move up potentially to get one of those top guys?
Well, fortunately for us, we know that, if Joe Ortiz and his scouting team are convicted on a player, that they will go up and get them if they want to. And so they traded, obviously, down from, or up from 37 to 34 to go get Lab McConkey. And so I think for me, looking at this situation where the Chargers are at 22, I think 12 to 15 is probably still a little bit too far away for me. I think if you see somewhere in the 16, 7, maybe 18 pick range, I can definitely see a more realistic pathway to the Chargers potentially trading up to secure their tight end of the future.
Yeah, and the team, at least for Warren, that makes the most sense going into it by team needs is probably the Colts. If he's going to go in the top 15, I don't see the Chargers going up to try to get him. I mean, going 22, even to 12, you're talking about massive, massive draft capital that you're going to have to move to get that done. For me, I hope they don't move up any more than it would take a day 3 pick for. I mean, the Chargers, we're going to talk about it a lot on this episode, but they only have 3 picks in the top 100, 3 picks in the top 124 picks.
Right.
Those are super, super, super important to you, given the needs that you still have on this roster right now. And everything's fluid and things can change. As far as realistic ones, the Bengals and the Broncos were both the biggest teams potentially going to go after Colston Loveland, or at least that's what the narrative was out there based on what they had on their roster. Both of those teams filled needs at tight end with Mike Gesicki and with the Bengals, and obviously with the Broncos, they ended up getting Evan Ingram instead of the Chargers. I don't think the Bengals will take one because they just paid 2 wide receivers an insane amount of money. I don't think they're going to take a tight end after the Gesicki move. The Broncos, I still could, because I think they have less super glaring holes. Like, it feels like the Bengals are going to have to spend every first-round pick on defense for the next 10 season. Yeah, like that's what it feels like.
All defense.
So maybe, hey, 19, get up in front of the Broncos. Don't let Sean Payton take Colston Loveland.
I could see for sure.
That would upset Jim Harbaugh. So I think that's a right around where I would think is kind of realistic, and you could probably get that done potentially for a 4th-round pick or something along those lines.
And if it's a Jim player, then Jim's already showed you that he will not stop until he collects all of the players that he has went out there and coveted. So
no matter when he wanted them. But let's get to this next Fan Mail Friday question from Cam, who says, thoughts on trading back in the first round of the draft to get an extra 2nd or 3rd rounder, taking best available offensive lineman in the first that can play guard, and then loading up on tight end, running back, and wide receivers in round 2 or 3. Depth in the draft class at tight end and running back makes this feel good. I don't hate this. And I'll tell you why I don't hate it. Because like I talked about before, specifically offensive line, I think you could go back and forth about what position you should take, but you do have an opening still at left guard. The Chargers have 3 picks in the top 124 picks, and there's a ton of different directions they could go with it, right? And I also think that there's very little chance, in my opinion, that say the Chargers do this and then get 4 picks in the first, 3 rounds, because you're adding a 2nd or 3rd round pick. Are they going to spend all of those on offense? You're going to go guard, then tight end, and then running back, and then wide receiver? Probably not, right? So I think that it depends on who's available. Has to be a top guy, though. I don't think you're, reaching for an offensive lineman there. If one of the best falls into your lap there, maybe you trade back and take him. I'm not going to just take the 4th best guard because I need to address offensive line, but I'm not totally opposed to moving down, given what their needs are.
Here's the problem with moving down, though. When you look at the available players as far as interior offensive linemen that are ranked in even the top 50, whether you look at PFF, it's one player, it's Tyler Booker, and he's their 48th ranked prospect. And then you go to the Athletic, there's only 3 players inside the top 50. It's Tyler Booker at 29, Gray Zabel, the guard/center from North Dakota State, at 34, and then Donovan Jackson, the guard/tackle from Ohio, at 35. So there really just is not a large selection of high-end rated players that are going to be available even in the first round. It's pretty much, it's Tyler Booker and nobody else, at this point when you look at, those
Gray Zabel is probably
players.
going to be a 1st-round pick. The way things have gone in the offseason, that's where it's trending, and people think he can even be a center. So I think the hard thing that makes it convoluted a little bit is there's a lot of listed tackles. They're going to be guards, and there's currently listed a tackle, right? There's interior offensive line that could be centers or guards. But you're right, and that's my whole point, too. You don't reach for one. I'm all for, potentially trading back, but I don't think I would do it and then specifically just take an offensive line because of the hole that you have there. So I totally agree with you there. You might not have that guy. You better be really sure if they're going to do that and bank on that. But let's get to this one here from Blake Bryant on Twitter, who says, with new recent free agent signings, what are your predictions on the first 3 rounds of the draft this year? I'm hoping we'll make a move for a top running back in the first round, kind of like how the Lions did with Jahmyr Gibbs, which I've heard that premise out there, and I don't think it, it's super outlandish. This is hard for me, David, because to me, it could go to any of these 6 positions. Tight end, receiver, interior defensive line, edge rusher, running back, and I'll even put interior offensive line together. That's 6 positions for 3 picks. What did you end up going with?
Yeah, I mean, obviously those are all the top positions of need as we look at it right now. But I think when I have to narrow it down to 3, I think, they absolutely need to aggressively and emphatically address the tight end position, from a pass catching standpoint. So I would expect them to address that, within their first 3 picks. Then this is a very, densely populated draft with interior defensive linemen. According to pretty much any of the experts out there,
Sure.
Very, very, very talent laden. So I think they'll probably grab an interior defensive lineman. And then they did bring back Khalil Mack, but they also need to prepare for life after Khalil Mack. So I do believe that edge rusher should be, and probably is, very high up on the list of needs that need to be addressed. So those are the 3 positions for me.
So in that scenario, you're leaving out wide receiver, right? No receiver in the first 3 rounds is going to drive people crazy. You're leaving out running back? Or did you? Yeah, really leaving out running back in that one. And you're also leaving out interior offensive line in that scenario. So you have no left guard, the running back, you have Najee Harris at least, but wide receiver, there's no way that you're going to make everyone happy. And that's why
you can't.
The thought of trading back, it looks a little bit more feasible. And what if you did this? You want to do the Jahmyr Gibbs route? What if you did in reverse? What if you trade back in the first round for a Travion Henderson to get that lightning to go with your Thunder, right? Yeah. Pick up an extra 3rd round pick, and then now you're looking at something where that guy might sneak into the end of the first round.
I'd love that.
And you have 3 more picks in the top 100 to fill the needs that we just went over. But there's a lot of different ways. Yeah, there's a lot of different ways they could go with it, but I think that's why trading back does have some appeal. We still have some more great stuff to get into, including how confident we are in Greg Roman getting this running game back on track after the disappointment of 2024, and more in today's Locked On Chargers podcast.
The NCAA tournament is here, and so is the bracket breakdown.
Locked On Podcast Network and Amazon Fire TV channels are teaming up to deliver NCAA tournament coverage like never before. Watch studio shows featuring former players and Locked On's local experts as they guide you through every upset, buzzer beater, and bracket matchup.
Stream it all for free on Amazon Fire TV channel. Search Bracket Breakdown to see it all for free.
It's your team every day.
All right, David, we still have more Fan Mail Friday questions to get into, and thank you to everyone who hit us up, not just at Locked On LIC on Twitter, but also in the YouTube chat. Love seeing the YouTube questions that we got today, and we have a couple here to get into. And thank you for everyone making us your first listen today. If you need a second listen, make sure you stay up to date with all the latest draft news with the Locked On NFL Draft Show with my guys Keith Sanchez and Damian Parson as they keep you up to date while the flurry of free agency is going on YouTube and wherever you get your podcast from. This one is from Austin Nix on YouTube, who has a great question for us. On a scale of 1 to 10, how confident are you in a Greg Roman bounce-back season that elevates the Bolts to a top 10 rushing attack in 2025, featuring Najee Harris behind the new body movers we have brought in thus far? What do you think?
Well, I am really excited about the prospects of what Mekhi Becton and Joe Alt are capable of doing on the right side. I mean, I think those guys are really, really going to turn into the power side for the Chargers offensive line. I think they're going to be the ones that are going to be just absolutely bullying people and running people over and opening up holes. So I really love that pairing. And also, I think bringing that in and then also bringing in Andre James to compete with Bradley Bozeman, it raises, that level of competition and therefore hopefully the level of play that's, demanded and the output that we receive from that position. So I think what I'm looking at right now is probably like a 6 is where I'm at on my confidence level, just because of last year. I mean, they had obvious issues on the interior of the offensive line that they had to fix, and they have to continue to do that. So we have to see what the totality of the offseason looks like, including the draft, before I can give you my full confidence level. But as of right now, as of how the team is constructed with Najee Harris, with Mekhi Becton, with Andre James, I think I'm at a 6.
Totally understand that. And I think it's important to talk about how big of a gap that they need to bridge, right? And last year, the Chargers ranked 17th in total rushing yards, 7th worst, though, in yards per carry, and they ranked 21st in rushing DVOA. So there wasn't a metric last year they were top 10 in, unless you're talking about top 10 worst in yards per carry. But I think the biggest problem last year is 17th doesn't even seem that bad. That's middle of the pack, right? You're literally right around average. The problem is it was so inconsistent. So you'd have some really huge games, and then you would just disappear way, way too often.
Yeah.
The reason that makes me hopeful, Mekhi Becton, huge upgrade in the running game. It's not in the running game for sure, but I think the problem is right now is that's really the only place you look and you're saying that dude's going to give me a better running game outside of Najee Harris, who I think does raise the floor of what you can do, especially because he's going to be out there every game you expect. In those 4 games in which they missed J.K. Dobbins, if they had him those 4 games, you're probably not talking about the 17th ranked rushing game, right? It'd probably be at least a little bit better because it totally dropped off the face of the earth when he left.
Absolutely.
The other part is it's not 100% guaranteed that Andre James is an upgrade in the run blocking department. You're hoping he can get back to 2023. But Bradley Bozeman's actually been the better run blocker in his career when you're looking at year in and year out. So it's hard to say. I would put it, I'm going to seem like the optimist, at a 7 right now, assuming that we're going to see another running back and another offensive lineman added. It's so hard to do these conversations at this point of the year, obviously, but we know you guys want to know about it. So I'd put it at a 7. I feel reasonably confident that it's going to be a pretty big upgrade, getting to around 10. I don't think that's out of the question by any means. But let's get to Charles Crone on YouTube, who asks, would you guys rather the Chargers keep J.K. Dobbins and give him an equal amount of snaps to Najee Harris, or should they move on from him and draft his replacement in April? What do you think?
Man, that's a really tough one because I really like J.K. Dobbins and what he brought to the table, and I love his attitude, and he's a really easy person to root for, just from a personality standpoint. And like when he was on the field, and he was right, like he made plays. He had several explosive plays, some 30, 40+ yard touchdowns on his record and what he was able to provide for the Chargers last year. But I mean, I think it's almost obvious what the Chargers wanted to do. I mean, they prioritized a different style of running back by bringing in Najee Harris, and so I think that they're probably going to look to the draft to find his running mate. And who knows? We'll see how the draft actually shakes out because J.K. Dobbins is still out there. Doesn't seem like there's a whole lot of interest, at least at this point in time. And we know that there are several players that the Chargers have decided to sign well after the draft. So, just because, free agency has slowed down doesn't mean that it has stopped. So, I think personally, I think that they're probably going to roll with Najee Harris as RB1, and they're probably going to draft his running mate in this year's draft.
Well, and I think the hard thing to know is how this team feels about Kamani Vidal, right? Like that's the thing is we don't know how much kind of internal optimism there is inside that building that he can make a big leap. This is the second point I'd bring up. Do we know that J.K. Dobbins wants to come back here now?
Yeah.
Because I get what you're saying about seeing them get equal snaps. I don't think you bring Najee Harris in to give him equal snaps with someone. I just don't. So I think that's unrealistic. J.K. Dobbins wouldn't come in as the primary back anymore. Like that's just, they're not going to bring in J.K. Dobbins and have him all of a sudden be the starter over Najee Harris after, going and making him the first guy they signed as far as external free agents go on day one. So I think that it's unlikely, and I wonder how much he would want to come back on his side of things. I think he's also hurt by the fact that it does feel like it's a good running back draft class, or at least those are the reports that are out there. We're going to dive deeper into it this weekend, but unfortunately, like the Bengals game, he put that game away. That was so much fun. The really Panthers game, finishing the long touchdown run after breaking a couple against the Raiders and not being able to finish the job, and just seeing him be healthy and put together the season you knew he could put together, even in, a 13-game season. But we have one more here from Adonis Adventures on YouTube, who asks, with the wide receiver room the way it is now, what's the plan for Quentin Johnston? Let him develop for another year and see? Trade him now for an upgrade before the draft, or draft to replace him? This is a tough one, David, because I feel like even though we had a better feeling about kind of how much you didn't trust Quentin Johnston after year one than you do now, but I feel like now it's almost worse because you've actually seen him kind of play well, and now it's really kind of uncertain what he's going to be in year 3.
Yeah, I think the people it's just like it's almost like one of the cool things to make fun of Quentin Johnston and to laugh at him and kind of ridicule what he's done. But when you look at the actual numbers, like there's obviously no way to deny the fact that he grew and was much better, exponentially better from year 1 to year 2. Like this is a player that you can still consider is ascending and is improving. His rookie season, it was 38 catches on 64 targets for 431 yards and 2 touchdowns. Last season, it's 55 receptions on 88 targets and 711 yards, and 8 touchdowns. So all of those numbers increased exponentially. Are there still parts of his game that he needs to work on? Yes, we all know that. Obviously, the hands need to continue to be worked on, but I still feel very strongly that when you bring in a Mike Williams that slots in on that X position where he deserves and should be, that means you can put Quentin Johnston where he needs to be and where he should be, which is in that Z role. You allow him to get in motion and you give him more running open lanes to be able to go get those yards after catch that he so has done extremely well with in his career. He is still getting better. Now, if he drops off the face of the earth, then yeah, but also consider he's on a cost-controlled contract. He's not making anywhere close to the type of money that a lot of these other players are. So when you consider that he's getting better, then that he's still on a pretty reasonably, cost-controlled rookie contract, I think you still need to let it unfold as much as, a lot of fans out there are really already calling for his head.
Yeah, I mean, I don't blame the frustration of the fans. Like, I think it goes too far, and people take it to a level where it's just like you're kind of just not respecting him as a human, and I totally disagree with any of that. But like, I don't think there is very much trade value for Quentin Johnston right now. So I think keeping Quentin Johnston is better than trading him for a 6th round pick, where you're really not going to save that much money because he's on a rookie contract anyways.
Yeah,
I think the best thing you can do at this point is get your receiver room to a point where you don't need him to have a breakout season, and then if he does it, even better, and you're just in a better spot than you thought you'd be. I mean, we saw it, 13 catches for 186 yards in that Raiders game. That's what the top end looks like.
Yeah.
The problem is you followed it with a 0 catch performance in a playoff game on 5 targets. Unacceptable. Yeah. If you want to be a major part of the offense, you cannot have that game. All the improvements, all of those things he did great. That is awesome, and it gives you hope. You can't have that game. You can't. And the other game where he had the exact same stat line was in a big game you had against the Ravens, right? Where he had all the drops. 0 catches on 5 targets. It's so hard to know what to do with Quentin Johnston or what he's going to be. I don't think there's certain parts of his game that are ever going to be great. I don't think he's ever going to be the jump ball guy, the down the sideline guy. And I just don't think that's what his game's going to be, which is fine. But I also think after year 3 in the NFL at the wide receiver position, for the most part, there's probably rare cases where guys start breaking out in year 4 or 5. Not often. With receivers, you usually know. So I think the leap was nice. But we're also talking about a receiver last year that had 50 yards or less in 12 out of the 15 games that he had. You need more consistency out of it if you want to plan on him being a big part of your offense, and I don't think you can count on it right now, which is what makes what to do with him and how you address that position right now so tough. I think Mike Williams takes some of the things that he does poorly away, so he should be getting more of those targets. You hope to keep seeing them use him in a better role. But man, it's really hard to know what to do with Quentin Johnston right now. But I think it's much better to see if he breaks out than try to get rid of him, which doesn't really make a lot of sense for you. But that's going to wrap things up for today's show. On Monday, we start Mock Draft Mondays. And the 2 guys we're definitely looking at right now, Tet McMillan and Matthew Golden. So make sure you guys are back on Mock Draft Monday as we get into the top receiving options in this draft class. And to make sure you don't miss it, go subscribe or follow for free on the Locked On Chargers YouTube channel and listen wherever you get your podcast from, as well as finding the show every day on all of our social media. On Twitter, at LockedOnLAC, where we got a lot of these fan mail questions. On Instagram, at Locked On Chargers, and our Locked On Chargers Facebook page. Or you can call into the voicemail line like Nick at 323-524-7924. But thank you guys, as always, for giving us one of our best off seasons we've ever had, especially the last couple of weeks with free agency. You guys have really shown up, and we appreciate the everydayers always for that. But make sure you guys are back here on Monday for Mock Draft Monday. Until then, take it easy and go Bolts.